When you think of Ohio, what comes to mind? Cornfields, the Rust Belt, a quiet, unassuming state in the heart of the Midwest? Well, you might want to look closer, because beneath the rolling hills and the mundane exterior lies a landscape charged with ancient energy, government conspiracies, and things that go bump in the night. Today, we're taking a road trip to the uncanny side of the Buckeye State. We'll start by standing in the shadow of the great Serpent Mound, the largest serpent effigy in the world, where the ground itself seems to buzz with a strange ancient power. Then we'll visit a cemetery in Cleveland to stare into the blackened, weeping eyes of the Hazarod Angel, a statue that looks less like a memorial and more like a weeping angel waiting to send you back in time. We'll descend into Crystal Cave, the world's largest geode, where the crystals are so massive they hum with a mystic resonance. Then we'll walk the hallways of the only museum of witchcraft and magic in America. And finally, we will end our journey in a place where the government forced an entire town to vanish. A place now rumored to be the home of mutants, cults, and the legendary Melonheads. A place that they call Helltown. So buckle up, because Ohio is a lot scarier than you remember. The Great Serpent Mound. I want to lead this off by saying that this is a site that Tom has actually visited and seen in person, and the Great Serpent Mound is truly a sight to behold. For starters, with dimensions of 1,348 feet, that's 411 meters in length, and standing 3 feet high, it is the largest serpent effigy in the world, and was created more than 2,000 years ago, if what current findings suggests is true. And I think that the air of mystery as to who made it is definitely part of the allure of the place. Nor can it be denied that, when you stand near this wonder of ancient engineering, the air is just kind of charged and buzzing with energy. Nothing creepy or negative necessarily, but there is definitely an energy or a presence to the place. While there's not much that I can tell you about why the Serpent Mound was built, or who it was built by, I can tell you emphatically that the amount of controversy and drama around the studying of the site, that it's really quite staggering. If not outright mind-blowing. Everyone is questioning and discrediting everyone else's findings, questioning methodology, etc. Basically, it's an archaeologist version of Days of Our Lives. So while a lot of things can't be said for certain, I'll do my best to break this down into something coherent. One thing that has been agreed upon, for the moment at least, is that findings in 2014 that showed the mount as being 2,100 to 2,300 years old were seemingly verified in 2019 by a different archaeological team. That has led some to speculate that it was the Adena culture that constructed this enormous effigy. However, almost immediately, another team came out questioning the findings and beginning a lot of academic mudslinging and disagreeing that the Adena culture had anything to do with the effigy's construction at all. Another point that doesn't seem to be hotly up for debate is a consensus that around the year 1200 CE, the Fort Ancient culture occupied the area around the mound and did restoration work to the sculpture. The Fort Ancient peoples themselves are pretty interesting. The period of their existence is kind of like the Assyrian timetable, as it's broken into 3 distinct periods of early, middle, and late. During the earlier periods, the Fort Ancient people were very nomadic. Even after they took up maize agriculture and began living in almost nuclear family-style conditions in settlements of 40 to 50 people, these settlements would only exist very briefly before the group packed up and moved on once more. During their later period, the Fort Ancient people actually constructed buildings that could house multiple families at once. But even these settlements wouldn't be around for more than about 20 to 25 years before the inhabitants packed up and moved on once more. The effigy itself is truly staggering in its scale and dimensions. Made up from 3 distinct parts, Serpent Mound extends over 400 meters and varies anywhere from 9 inches to 3 feet in height, with widths between 20 and 25. Built on a bluff, the mound conforms to the surrounding land, winding this way and that for over 800 feet. It also features a triple-coiled tail at the end of the structure. The mound itself is made predominantly of yellowish clay and ash, with a layer of rocks and soil to reinforce the outer layer. The generally accepted interpretation of the effigy is that of an open-mouthed serpent nearly engulfing a hollow oval feature that, itself, is 120 feet in length. Some think the oval depicts an egg. Others say it could be a representation of the sun, or even the body of a frog. Like all good art, it's open to interpretation, I suppose. Now here is where it gets really interesting, because on the western side of the site there is a triangular mound roughly 31.6 feet, that's 9.6 meters, at its base, and long axis, which is reminiscent of similar effigies found in Canada and Scotland. We do have a, relatively speaking, decent idea of some of the history of this area in question where the mound is located. Going back as far as 13,000 years, hunter-gatherer groups of Paleo-Indians occupied the region, and they moved seasonally in search of wild game to hunt, which included mastodons. The remains of over 150 mastodons have been found in Ohio, with the most complete skeleton being found at the Burning Tree Mastodon site. Following the Paleo-Indians in the Woodland period were a more developed set of cultures and people. It was during this period where signs of more sophisticated dwellings and tools were found. This was also the first period where signs of people building earthworks and mounds became evident. Most academics seem to agree that most of these, if not all, were developed for religious purposes, possibly as ceremonial sites, as evidenced of some of the mounds being used as burial grounds does exist. It is in the Middle and Late Woodland period where the 2 specific sets of people thrived, the Hopewell and the Adena culture. Once agriculture became a thing, the Woodland people's population began to boom, and many people lived in larger villages, often surrounded by fortifications or even defensive ditches or trenches. I mention this because the Adena people brought a lot of innovation to the area, as they were the first to bring clay pottery to the Ohio area. With their level of sophistication, the time frame that they existed in the area, I, for whatever it's worth, think that the Adena culture were the most likely to have built the Serpent Mound to begin with. Occam's razor and all that. But all of this is to say, if you live in Ohio, or anywhere near Peebles, Ohio specifically, this site is definitely worth taking a visit to for yourself. Just standing and walking among such an ancient and sacred place is one of those things that words can't really do justice to, no matter how hard I may try. The Angel of Death Victorious, or the Hazarat Crying Angel. This, I think, is one of the most interesting spots that we've come upon during our research for this particular script. And maybe it's because I'm a bit of a Doctor Who nerd, that's Tom, and a complete mark for every episode about the Weeping Angels. Not that they specifically have anything to do with this little monument, but if they were real, this monument would definitely be one of them. Doctor Who references aside, let me tell you a bit about the Angel of Death Victorious, or commonly known as the Hazarat Crying Angel, and yes, even as the Weeping Angel. Located in Cleveland's Lakeview Cemetery, this beautiful if unsettling monument was commissioned in 1919 by industrialists Francis Henry Hazarat, the president of the Hazarat Company of Cleveland, after the untimely death of his wife, and was constructed in 1924. This memorial sits upon the Hazarat family plot amidst the over 100,000 resting places for people as famous as the former, if brief, late President James Garfield. Perhaps owing to its location in such a large cemetery amidst such tragic souls as the late president, or the more nefarious, such as John D. Rockefeller. I say nefarious because the Rockefellers know what they've done. If you know, you know. And if you're curious, just start by looking up the man they call Devil Bill Rockefeller and enjoy that rabbit hole. All those digressions out of the way, the other thing that has certainly not helped the reputation of the statue being a haunted or supernatural monument are what seem to be black tears it weeps as it sits vigil over the resting places of the Hazarat family. That's right. The statue appears to have blackened tears streaming down its angelic face. These weren't necessarily part of the statue's original aesthetic either. They are things that have appeared over time due to the oxidation of the bronze metal. Although the odds of that oxidation appearing in the form of blackened tears may seem a bit astronomical, so perhaps there could be something supernatural about the statue after all. That would certainly seem to be the case, as many people who visit the century-old statue in the famous cemetery report to experience strange phenomena, such as phantom noises, strange apparitions, sensations of being watched. All the usual things often reported when dealing with a haunted location. Perhaps there's something to all that. Or maybe it's just the subconscious responding to a plethora of stimuli. A potential combination of the natural unease that comes with visiting a graveyard, coupled with the unsettling image of the angel itself. Its cold bronze visage resting atop a marble gravestone, holding an inverted torch to symbolize the snuffing of the flame of life. Fatalistic? Perhaps. Nihilistic? Certainly, but among a vast cemetery with so many monuments trying to depict some kind of joy or promise of reward in the great hereafter, the statue certainly offers a different kind of message, signifying the inherent fear of death, and the fact that maybe, just maybe, it's a bit more permanent than we would like to believe. Crystal Cave. So we've checked off mysterious earthen monument and haunted graveyard with creepy angel statue, so what's next? Well, we're now headed into the very earth itself to take a look at a place that could almost be magical enough to earn a spot as a setting in a fantasy story. Not taking notes here or anything. From dirt and stone to iron and tears, now we head into an ancient geode. Not just a geode, but the world's largest geode. Instead of finding tiny particles of quartz inside another larger, more sturdy stone, what if you could step through a crack in the earth and find crystals that tower over you? I kind of thought that might get someone's attention. Yes, in this cave there are crystals that dwarf humans. Stones that were just being formed at the same time that we were maybe single-cell organisms in some primordial ocean. Just a guess. I'm not actually a geologist, so... This natural wonder of the world was uncovered back in 1897. And of course, this story starts with a couple of guys that were digging a well for the Heinemann winery. I'm sure once they actually saw the cave, they probably felt like they had lost their mind. Or maybe stumbled into another world. They didn't find crystals that would make cute little trinkets. They found crystals that would make very fine furniture. Hulking chunks of crystal that you could lean against. Unfortunately, human beings as they are, this cave wasn't initially treated with respect. It was gutted pretty thoroughly, and the pieces of crystal were used in fireworks and to pave roads. Yes, Raven. That's weird self-reference, Tom, thank you. You read that right, and yes, listeners, you heard that right. They paved roads with gleaming stones older than human DNA. While what is left is still a breathtaking sight to behold, you can't help but feel like it's just less. Like looking at a picture that you know is a great picture now, but back before it survived some horrific accident, it would have been a phenomenal picture. It's like that, but with geology. Despite the travesty that befell this wonderful little cave, it is still something that you would never see again in your lifetime. And of course, what would a Strange Things script be without a little supernatural icing for your curiosity cake? If you've seen the Strange Things in Michigan episode, then you'll probably remember a piece that we did on the Singing Sands. Well, I found their harmonizing counterpart for you. Humming crystals. Yes, humming crystals. If we can find some kind of percussional phenomenon, then we have an a cappella group in the making. As to what makes the crystals hum, well, a scientist will tell you it's physics and acoustics. A mystic will tell you that it's magic. Celestine crystals resonate with divine energy, they will tell you. I'm neither magician nor scientist, so I'll say this. When you're standing inside of a crystal cavern, carved out of the earth itself and then populated by crystals taller than people, and older than the most ancient of our civilizations that hum, I think it's okay to believe in just a little magic. But humming isn't the only strange phenomena that are associated with this breathtaking piece of natural artistry. Some of the guides that lead tours through Crystal Cave talk about the Crystal Heart. The old theory that the cave is the heart of the island, and that the crystals inside store a psychic energy, and as such will absorb emotions, fears, dreams, and even memories. Sometimes they say you can hear the whispers of those that came before you, that the crystals held on to a little piece of. There are, of course, other stories that go along with this. If you spend too much time in the cave, it's believed that you'll begin to have strange visions or waking dreams. And much as Blarney Castle in Ireland, it's said to have a famous curse that if you walk away with any piece of stone from the grounds, you will be cursed. If you leave with the piece of the crystals from the cave in your pocket, you'll be plagued by the visions, dreams, and psychic whispers of the very crystal itself. Whether there's any truth to that, I can't say. Maybe if you're curious enough, you'll go to the Crystal Cave and find out for yourself, but please don't send me any haunted psychic crystals. They wouldn't be sending them to you, Tom. They would send them to me. Thanks. Anyway, walking out of the cave with pilfered loot in your pocket aside, this cave would definitely be a place to visit at least once. Whether you're wanting to investigate the humming, psychic crystal phenomena, or just stand inside something that will tell you exactly how young and immature our civilization is, Crystal Cave should definitely be on the bucket list of places to go. The Buckland Museum of Witchcraft and Magic. This is going to be one of the most interesting stops that we've had yet. From the mysticism of Fort Ancient, or older people, to the eerie spiritual presence of a weeping angel, to a magical place created in the womb of the earth itself, to now something focusing on the magical achievements of man. We're going to take a look at a museum of magic and witchcraft that was created by the man often called the father of Wicca in America, Raymond Buckland. Raymond Buckland himself was a writer and practitioner of Wicca, which he studied under Gerald Gardner, who was the father of modern Wicca in the UK. Initially, Buckland would open his museum dedicated to Wicca and the other occult things in 1966 in Long Island, New York, and his goal was to curate exhibits that would document mankind's ever-expanding codex of the mystical, and to preserve the occult artifacts and knowledge that was often discounted or destroyed outright. As such, he began to collect all manner of relics from around the world. Some of the things he began to collect included ceremonial wands, atames, or ceremonial knives, chalices and robes, and Egyptian and Native American ritual instruments. This is just the tip of that iceberg. But it's all to say that Buckland was committed to preserving things that were being destroyed or otherwise, in his eyes, disrespected. As a practitioner of Wicca, it's safe to say that, like anyone else, he was looking to have his beliefs validated, and to share those with other like-minded or curious people. In that spirit, he set out to expand his collection, and in time he had thousands of relics from all over the world. Egyptian charms to protect the dead, Native American ritual objects, daggers and wands of modern-day witches. He wasn't into trickery or sensationalized fiction. He truly was dedicated to preserving and deepening our understanding of things that were being erased. Buckland excelled at blurring the lines of history and mysticism. Sadly, the original museum closed in the 1980s, after which the collection was locked away in storage until 2017, when Buckland passed away. The new incarnation of his Witchcraft and Magick museum reopened in Cleveland, where it still remains. The atmosphere really reflects what Buckland set out to achieve. It's part museum and part cabinet of curiosities, with an intimate, if uncanny, feeling about the place as you gaze over ancient artifacts that were once in active use. Looking at talismans and charms that were believed, and some still are, to either conjure or ward off spirits. Buckland wasn't trying to create some haunted sideshow attraction. He was very serious in the work that he did, and that was preserving occult history. Perhaps that ended up looking a bit on the eccentric side, but his vision really translates when you're standing among these tools of belief. Things that were actually used as people, most long dead, performed their rituals and put their faith in them. Most significant of all, I think, is the fact that Buckland's museum is the one and only permanent witchcraft and occult museum in America. In the land that was founded on Puritan belief, I think it speaks volumes that he was able to establish his museum at all, much less for it to still have its doors open in 2025. And if you want a little bit more of a supernatural thrill, you might be in luck, as staff and visitors routinely report unexplained cold spots, or how certain artifacts will be shifted just slightly compared to how they were. I suppose the only question on this would be, is it the presence of the people who once used these items? Or is it whatever some of them were meant to conjure? I suppose really it could be either. Buckland set out to preserve and show a lineage of belief and demonstrate how different cultures all over the world sought the same kind of higher knowledge. The same desire to look beyond what is, and see what might be lurking on the other side. So, I think it would stand to reason that echoes of the people that once held these tools in their hands, and believed wholeheartedly in their use, may still linger. There are some things about the place that would definitely trigger perhaps certain feelings of unease as you browsed the exhibits. Just imagine when you look at this carefully cataloged and curated collection of oddities and manuscripts, what kind of a window does it create? Not just into our physical pasts, but a spiritual past. A spiritual past that even now, possibly hundreds if not 1,000 years later, is lying in front of you. A tool that some person once held in their hands and used in practice of their beliefs. Buckland set out to create a preserve of sorts for the misunderstood or demonized belief systems. Ones that, while they may go against the modern norms, or be viewed as primitive and outdated, are still a huge piece of our collective history. Regardless of what corner of the planet you're from, or what corner of it in which you live, Buckland's collection serves to demonstrate that regardless, whether it was in the Nile Delta, the Balkan Mountains, the far-flung corners of Australia, or the Great Plains of North America, we are all human. We all have the same questions and ponder the same eternal mysteries. I think that, more than anything, that was the idea that Buckland wanted to preserve. At least, I like to think that. He wasn't out to highlight all the things that separate us, but by the shared mystery and wonder that, in fact, united us all and made us all human. Helltown. So, I was going to leave this at just 4 things. 4 is a nice, round number. Actually, it's quite sharp if you've ever looked at one, Tom. 4 seasons, 4 ring posts, 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Just a really nice celestial number. But then it also hit me that in Chinese culture, 4 is an ill omen, often associated with death. That's a simplified version. There's a whole cultural thing about it that I'll get into another time. And so I went off in search of that something truly interesting, maybe a little dark, just to hang our hat on at the end of the day. And my friends, almost immediately this place jumped out at me. It has the echoes of Inonaki Village from the Supernatural Legends of Japan episode. Give it a listen, no bias here. Yes, I have gone and found a place in America that echoes stories of a notoriously creepy, if not mythic town in Fuyuki. Call it my life's mission to find and show the intricacies of how things are all connected. Boston Township, Summit County. Obviously, in Ohio. That would be what I suppose you'd call the official designation, but it's more commonly referred to as Helltown, with no relation to Hell, Michigan. Today, it's one of the most infamous ghost towns in the United States. But what happened here wasn't so much a natural disaster or people moving further west to pursue greener pastures. No, it was very much man-made. This town was forced to be deserted by one of the most powerful, ominous, and feared forces of all: bureaucracy. President Gerald Ford in the 1970s decided that he wanted to scoop up as much land as possible for the creation of the Cuyahoga Valley National Park. Of course, he immediately faced the problem, the tale as old as the states themselves, of a bunch of people living right where he didn't want them to be living. Shame on them, having the audacity to build lives and families right where a president wanted to make a national park. How dare they? So in 1974, he gave the National Park Service the green light to begin, quote, acquiring this land. This came in the form of federal agents walking into town and beginning to buy lots, houses, commercial buildings, everything. And, just to make it clear that the land was now theirs, they placed big old government property no trespassing signs everywhere. And that's the funniest way yet I've seen of spelling not welcome. But go figure. There was no biblical flood, no swarm of locusts, no curse killing the firstborn in the night. Just men in black suits with a piece of paper, an ultimatum, and a loaded gun to just top off the gravitas. Uncle Sam is such a kind and benevolent uncle, sending his little nephews in black to do the job. Well, what is the absolute best way to start any creepy story? So there's this abandoned town out in the woods. When you have a place where people were forced out and only the empty shells of their homes and businesses remain, that is what you would call fertile breeding ground for legends and ghost stories. Of which, there are a few. Stories such as the haunted bus. Stories surrounding an old, rusted-out school bus were among the first and most popular of stories to come out of Helltown. The stories said that a killer once slaughtered the children on the bus and then left it as an abandoned tomb for them. Other versions say that it was an entire cult of Satan worshippers. It sounds like one of the best campfire stories to tell your friends over s'mores. The truth, of course, is infinitely more mundane. The bus itself was actually a makeshift shelter for a family. They stayed in the bus for a short time while their home was being renovated. Fact and fiction could never be further apart than with this story. And personally, I think that, while far darker and more macabre, the story of a cult or a mass killer is a bit more interesting. Then there's the satanic cults, as mentioned. There are other stories beyond creepy haunted buses that involve Satan-worshipping cults. There are other stories that tell of mysterious cloaked and hooded figures in the woods. Tales told that they would gather at the old abandoned church and perform their dark rituals. when animal bones were found in the area, that, of course, only fueled the fire of the occult stories, and that's a stigma that the ghost town has never really been able to shed, or even distance itself from slightly. Then there's the End of the World Road. Have you ever wanted to see the end of the world? Not the actual fiery apocalypse that consumes the world, more just stand on the edge of the cliff and witness where the world ends and eternity begins. Well, I'm not sure that that's actually possible, but there is a stretch of Stanford Road out of Helltown that definitely simulates that feeling when you're driving on it late at night. The road and terrain are so steep that as you crest the hill in the dark, your headlights seemingly vanish off into a void, and the road disappears so abruptly that it looks as if you're driving off the edge of the world. And in many stories, that is exactly what people claim to have watched happen. Cars going over the edge and vanishing into the eternal void. Of course, there's also the mutant town theory. With such an abrupt happening as an entire town suddenly being depopulated and taken into custody of the US government, it should come as no surprise that stories about mutations and experiments started to crop up at some point. Of course, the official story in the 1970s was national park expansion, but there will always be people that just don't swallow the official story blue pill that the authorities want them to. No, instead, other darker stories became the norm. No one wanted to hear a story about a town displaced by the government for something as mundane as park expansion. That's just not a compelling story at all, is it? There's hardly a hook. So now I want to bring up a very real and very hazardous site that is located near Helltown. The Krejci Dump. And once people learned of its existence during the 80s, well, the story kind of wrote itself. The dump was toxic, gross, and nasty beyond words. Decades of chemical dumping had contaminated the soil and water. EPA crews would discover barrels of toxic chemicals that were leaking right into the ground, some of them bearing the names and logos of very prominent businesses. And once these stories started making their way through the gossip mill, the entire tale of Helltown took on a new turn. It was no longer the story of a town displaced for the growth of a national park. No, it was now part of a cover-up for a monumental ecological disaster. The logical next step from such conspiracy stories is, of course, tales and rumors of mutants roaming the woods and the remains of the town. And it wasn't just human beings, of course, that were contaminated and mutating from this toxic spill, but animals too. Strange and misshapen things roaming the woods and town. Maybe these houses weren't empty because the populace had been relocated. Perhaps the houses were empty because unspeakable things had taken place there. Or maybe not. And then there are, of course, the stories of the Melonheads. Perhaps one of the most unnerving bits of folklore out of Ohio, though Michigan and Connecticut have variations of the story too. The Melonheads are one of those things that, when you first hear someone talking about them, sound absolutely absurd. Ridiculous, even. But the longer you listen to the story, the longer you think about it after the fact, the creepier it gets. So, the Melonheads are short and pale humanoid creatures that are often spotted in the Cuyahoga Valley, which puts them right on Helltown's doorstep. They're described as having huge bulbous heads, which is where their name is clearly derived from. Mostly seen at night darting in between the trees, what follows is entirely dependent on the story being told. It largely depends on what role the Melonheads play on that particular night. They're described as feral and sometimes violent. This has led to differing accounts in which they appear skittish, and others where they actively try to lure people into the woods to attack them. And in yet others, they are merely curious spectators peering out from behind the trees. The origins of these creatures is open for debate, but one of the most commonly told stories is that they are the descendants of escaped mental patients that hid in the woods, and ultimately reproduced amongst themselves, until inbreeding created what we know as the Melonheads. Another version places their creation squarely on Dr. Crow, or sometimes Dr. Crowley. The good doctor was said to keep children in captivity and perform horrendous experiments on them, which culminated in the large, disfigured heads they possess. These are both kind of specific to Ohio as far as the Melonhead lore is concerned, but due to such rumors as the Kretschy dump contaminating the area, plus the general location where Melonheads are mostly prevalent, it all led to speculation that the Melonheads are the product of the mutations from the toxic spill. So I guess that's kind of a point A to point B idea for these two items. Stories of the Melonheads have led to them kind of becoming the Ohio State cryptid, much the same way that Mothman, the Lizard Man, or even the Snallygaster have for their respective home states. There was even an indie horror film simply called Melonheads that was filmed in Ohio, and it essentially cemented them a place in the Ohio mythos. The thing that makes the Melonheads so unsettling is that they reside in the uncanny valley. They're not fully human, they're not quite fully a cryptid, and they certainly aren't some kind of metaphysical entity like a ghost or spirit. And the possibilities behind their origins make you deal with the concept that gave birth to the creatures: isolation, abuse, disfigurement, and experimentation. All in all, they scream uncanny Ohio. From the prehistoric engineering of the Adena culture to the toxic ruins of a government buyout, Ohio proves that strange isn't just found in Roswell or the Bermuda Triangle. Sometimes, it's right in your own backyard. So I do want to ask you all, which of these stops would you be brave enough to visit alone? Would you dare to take a piece of stone from Crystal Cave and risk the curse? Or would you drive down the end-of-the-world road in Helltown just to see where your headlights vanish? Of course, let me know in the comments below, and of course if you enjoyed this trip into the strange and scary, please do leave a like and subscribe if you're new to the channel and you're on the YouTube side, or if you're on Spotify, you can rate the podcast and leave a comment there as well. Comment your favorite thing we talked about today, or any ideas you have for any future state-by-state episodes. Also, if at least one of you could praise me for not making an only in Ohio joke throughout this entire episode, because while reading Tom's script, there were multiple times I wanted to say only in Ohio. I'm not even young enough for that joke to really make sense to me, but I've heard it enough on the internet that I wanted to make it. And I didn't, because I'm too old to be making silly jokes like that. Way too old. Probably by a factor of at least 2. That's a terrifying thought. Anyways, hopefully you all enjoyed this one. Yeah, not really much else to say. Hopefully I see you guys again here soon. Until then, remember that you are loved, you are valid, you are important, you're the bestie that you can be. Don't forget it, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Until next time, much love, and sleep well.